It started with the sound of the floorboards, a faint creak, soft enough that I could have mistaken it for the wind pushing against the old wooden frame of our house. But after the third night, I knew it wasn't the house. It was footsteps, careful, deliberate footsteps outside my son's room, and the person making them was my wife. At first I thought maybe she was just checking on him. Our son, Adam, had just turned 9, and he'd been having nightmares since his grandmother passed. Sometimes he'd wake up crying. Maybe she was just being a mother, right? But what struck me as strange was the time. Every night, around 2:40 a.m., not midnight, not 1, always 2:40, the kind of time that makes you question what someone's doing awake in the first place. So I started watching. I'd leave my door open just a crack, pretending to be asleep. Around that time, she'd quietly get out of bed. No light, no phone, just moved like she'd practiced this 100 times. She'd go down the hall, stop at Adam's door, and disappear inside. The door would stay shut for 10, maybe 15 minutes. Then she'd come back, climb into bed, and lie there like nothing happened. The first few nights I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe Adam needed her comfort. Maybe she was reading him a bedtime story again, even though it was hours past bedtime. But then I asked Adam casually over breakfast, "Hey buddy, did Mom come check on you last night?" He frowned, spoon in hand. "No," he said. "Why would she?" That's when my stomach dropped. I didn't want to accuse her of anything. We'd been married 12 years. She was quiet, gentle, the kind of woman who kept her emotions bottled up until they turned into something unreadable. But something about her lately. She'd been distant, forgetful. Sometimes she'd zone out mid-conversation, like she wasn't even in the room with me. I thought it was stress, but now it felt like something else entirely. So I decided to find out for sure. I ordered a small camera online, one of those pinhole ones that looks like a phone charger. It arrived 2 days later. I told her I had to work late that night, and when she went to the grocery store, I set it up just inside Adam's room, pointing toward the door and the side of his bed. I made sure it was silent, no blinking lights, no sound. She'd never know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound. When I heard her get up, I almost forgot to breathe. I waited until she was gone, then turned to the nightstand where the small receiver sat. The feed was live. The hallway appeared in dim grayscale. Then I saw her, my wife, moving toward Adam's door, wearing her nightgown, her hair falling in front of her face. She paused at the door, almost as if listening for something. Then she opened it slowly and slipped inside. At first, nothing happened. She just stood by his bed, staring down at him. He was asleep, peaceful. Then she reached out, brushed his hair back, and leaned closer. I thought maybe she was kissing his forehead, but no, she just stayed there. Her face inches from his, not moving, not speaking, just hovering. I felt my pulse in my ears. Then she did something that made my skin crawl. She whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but her lips were moving fast, like she was reciting something. A prayer? A chant? Her hands were shaking. Adam stirred, turned on his side. She froze completely still for several seconds, then slowly stepped back and left the room. I shut off the feed, my hands trembling. I didn't know what to think. Was she sleepwalking? Was this some kind of ritual? I didn't want to believe she was doing something wrong, but what I saw didn't look like love. It looked like obsession. The next morning, I couldn't look at her the same way. She made pancakes, humming softly like she always did. And when Adam ran into her arms, she smiled like everything was fine. But I couldn't shake the image of her standing in his room in the dark. I had to know more. The following night, I left the camera on again. This time, I stayed awake and watched live. 2:40 came again. She stirred, sat up, and left the bed. I turned my head just enough to watch her shadow pass under the hallway light. Then I looked at the screen. She was inside Adam's room again. This time, she sat on the edge of his bed. Her hand rested on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Then she began whispering again, faster this time, her lips barely visible in the grainy feed. She stayed like that for 10 minutes. I was about to get up and stop her when she suddenly jerked her head up like she'd heard something. She looked straight at the camera, right at it. I froze. My heart stopped. She stared for what felt like forever. Then she smiled. Not her usual smile. This one looked wrong. Too wide, too calm. After that, she stood up and left. I didn't sleep at all that night. In the morning, I acted normal. She didn't mention anything. But when I checked the camera after work, it was gone. Completely gone. The outlet was empty. When I asked her, she shrugged. "Maybe Adam found it," she said. You know how curious kids are. But Adam didn't find it. I knew he didn't. The plug was too high for him to reach, and when I looked through his toy chest, I found something else instead. Under his drawings and Lego pieces was a folded piece of paper. Inside it, in his handwriting, were 3 words. She whispers names. I sat there, reading it over and over. What names? That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until she fell asleep, then went into Adam's room myself. I searched every corner, under his bed, in his drawers, behind the curtains. Nothing. Then I noticed the nightstand. There was a small box tucked behind his lamp. I opened it. Inside were tiny scraps of paper. Each one had a different name written in my wife's handwriting. Some I didn't recognize, but one of them was mine. I felt the air leave my lungs. Why would she be writing names like this, and why hide them in our son's room? When I confronted her the next morning, she didn't deny it. She just looked at me and said, "You wouldn't understand." I pressed harder. "Understand what?" She stared past me, her voice low. "He hears them too." Those words still echo in my head. I don't know what she meant, but I can't shake the feeling that she wasn't talking about dreams, because that night, when I checked on Adam, he wasn't asleep. He was sitting up in bed, his eyes wide open, staring at the door like he was waiting for someone to come in. And then he said something I'll never forget. "Dad, can you tell her to stop whispering?" He wasn't talking about his mom. He was looking at the corner of the room. I froze where I stood, my hand still on the doorframe. His voice wasn't scared. It was tired, like this had been happening for a while. The moonlight hit just enough of his face for me to see his eyes, red, puffy, but strangely calm, like he'd accepted whatever was happening. I swallowed hard and asked him, "Who's whispering to you, Adam?" He pointed toward the corner. The air felt colder there, heavy somehow. I wanted to turn on the light, but something in me said not to, so I just walked over and waved my hand through the darkness. Nothing, no sound, but Adam flinched when I did it. "Don't," he said softly. "She doesn't like that." I knelt beside him. "Who doesn't like that?" He looked down. "Mom says she's helping me sleep." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Mom says she's helping me sleep." I stepped back. "Adam, when did she say that?" He blinked, confused. "She tells me every night, when she comes." But she wasn't coming at night anymore, at least not physically. I'd been awake beside her. She hadn't left the bed once since the camera disappeared. That's when something inside me cracked. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I knew there was something seriously wrong here. Either my son was hallucinating, or my wife, whatever she'd been doing, it had gone too far. I spent the next day trying to act normal. I went to work, smiled at my coworkers, answered emails, but my mind was back home, in that cold corner of Adam's room. I couldn't stop picturing her sitting there, whispering things into his ear. That night, I did something desperate. I installed a second camera, this time hidden inside a smoke detector. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend. I needed answers before I sounded insane. The first night, nothing. No movement, no whispers, no one leaving the bed. Adam slept soundly. I started to think maybe it was all in my head. But on the second night, the footage changed everything. Around 3 a.m., the camera caught Adam's bedroom door slowly creaking. Open, but no one was there. The hallway was empty. The door just opened. Then the blanket on his bed moved. Slowly, as if someone invisible had brushed their hand over it. Adam stirred. His lips started moving, whispering. I paused the video and rewound. There was no one visible, just the movement of the blanket and the faintest distortion in the air, like heat rising off a road. Then, right before the clip ended, Adam's eyes shot open and stared straight into the camera. The next morning, he didn't remember anything. I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted my wife again. "What's going on with him?" I asked. "What have you been saying to him at night?" She looked exhausted, her eyes shadowed like she hadn't slept in days. "You shouldn't have filmed us," she said flatly. "Us?" I repeated. "Who's us?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at the coffee cup in her hand like she was trying to read something in the ripples. "You think you understand what you saw," she said finally, "but you don't. You were never supposed to see it." I slammed my hand on the counter. "Then explain it." She didn't flinch. "She doesn't like being watched." That's when I realized she wasn't being cryptic. She was scared, genuinely scared. I tried to reason with her, asked if she meant some kind of therapy thing, some ritual, anything logical, but she just shook her head and whispered, "I tried to protect him from it, but it wants him now." That night I stayed awake again. I kept my phone by my side with the live feed open. 2:38, 2:39, 2:40, nothing. The room was still. Then, at 2:41, the feed flickered, just once. Then again. I stared at the screen. The corner of Adam's room, the same one he'd pointed to, started to darken, like a shadow spreading on the wall. It wasn't the kind that light makes. It looked thick, heavy. It moved toward the bed. Adam shifted, his blanket rising slightly. My chest tightened. I wanted to run in there, but something stopped me, some primal instinct that said, "Don't interrupt, don't let it notice you." Then, through the faint static of the camera, I heard whispering, not clear, just a rhythm, fast, low, like words wrapped inside each other. I turned up the volume, but the noise distorted into a sound I can't even describe. It wasn't human. I ran. When I opened the door, Adam was sitting up again, just like before, staring at the same corner. But this time, he was smiling. "It said I can sleep now," he murmured. Behind him, the air shimmered, like heat waves on asphalt, but the room was freezing cold. My wife appeared in the doorway behind me. She didn't look shocked. She didn't even look at Adam. She looked at me and quietly said, "Now you see her too." I grabbed Adam and pulled him out of the room. He was limp, half asleep, mumbling things I couldn't understand. I slammed the door shut and turned to her. "What the hell is that?" Her expression softened, almost pitying. "You shouldn't have interfered." I wanted to scream, but before I could, Adam's door burst open on its own. Hard. It slammed into the wall so violently it left a mark. Inside, the room was dark, but not the normal kind of dark. This was thick, alive. I felt it. Whatever was inside that room, it didn't want us there. My wife stepped forward, whispering something under her breath. I grabbed her arm, but she yanked it free and walked inside. The door slammed shut behind her. I pounded on it, called her name. No response. I kicked it open, and the room was empty. Completely empty. Adam was clinging to me, crying. "Dad, make it stop," he said, but I couldn't, because I didn't know how. I called the police, told them my wife had gone missing. They searched the house, the backyard, the woods behind us. Nothing. No sign of her. But the next morning, when I checked the footage again, she was there. The camera showed her sitting on Adam's bed, the night after she vanished, staring at the wall. And she wasn't alone. Someone else was sitting beside her, someone I couldn't recognize. Their face was turned toward the camera, smiling. I couldn't breathe when I saw that face on the screen. It wasn't distorted or blurry like you'd expect from bad footage. It was clear, too clear. Pale skin, eyes dark like something had been hollowed out of them. And that smile, it wasn't happy. It was the kind of smile that felt aware of you watching it, like it knew you were on the other side. I replayed the footage again and again, hoping it was a glitch, a reflection, anything. But every time the same thing happened. My wife sitting on the edge of Adam's bed, motionless, and that figure beside her, head slightly tilted, smiling straight at the lens. I pulled Adam out of bed and took him to a hotel that night. I didn't even bother packing. I just told him we were going on a trip. He didn't ask questions. He just looked relieved. But as we drove away, he kept glancing out the window, like he was afraid something was following us. At the hotel, I tried to act normal. Ordered him fries, put cartoons on, pretended like this was all a fun little getaway. But when he fell asleep, I checked the footage again. At 2:40 a.m., the feed flickered. The room we'd left behind was empty except for the bed. Then, out of nowhere, she walked in. My wife. Or something that looked like her. Her movements weren't right. Too slow. Too controlled. She stood by the bed for a long time, her head moving in small, stiff motions, like she was listening to something only she could hear. Then she turned to the camera again, leaned forward, and whispered something. I turned up the volume. The audio cracked and hissed, but I could make out one word, "Come." That's when my phone screen glitched and went black. I dropped it. The room felt colder all of a sudden, even though the heater was on. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just tired. But then I heard it. The same whispering sound. Not from the phone this time, from the vent above the bed. It was faint, but I swear it was her voice. I got up, dragged the chair over, and looked inside. Nothing but dark metal. I shut it tight and sat there until morning, not sleeping for a second. The next day, I took Adam to my sister's place 2 towns over. I didn't want to scare her, so I just said my wife had gone missing and we needed a place to stay for a few days. She didn't ask many questions, just hugged me and told me we could stay as long as we needed. But that night, Adam started talking in his sleep. At first, it was soft mumbling, but then his voice changed, lower, almost like 2 people were speaking through him. I leaned closer and realized he was saying names, the same kind of names I'd found written on those scraps of paper. I woke him up. He blinked, disoriented, then said, "Dad, she's mad you left." That was the first time I truly felt fear. Not confusion, not anxiety, just pure cold fear. Because I hadn't told him we were running. He didn't know that I'd seen her on the camera. The following morning, my sister found me sitting at the kitchen table staring at nothing. I tried to explain, but she thought I was having a breakdown. She said, "You've been through a lot. You're exhausted. Maybe you're seeing things." And maybe she was right. But then she froze mid-sentence. Her eyes widened, looking at something behind me. I turned around. Adam was standing in the doorway. His pajamas were covered in dirt, his feet bare. "Where did you go?" I asked. He just stared at me, eyes glassy. She said I forgot someone. I ran to the front door. It was wide open, cold air pouring in. Outside in the driveway there were footprints, small ones, his size. But next to them were others, bare, longer, heavier. I followed them with a flashlight. They led down the driveway, across the road, and into the woods. I stopped at the edge. The footprints went on for maybe 30 feet, then just stopped, like whoever it was had vanished. I called out her name, but all I heard was my own voice echoing back. When I turned to go back, Adam was standing at the tree line. He shouldn't have been there. I'd told my sister to keep him inside. He was holding something in his hand, a piece of paper. I snatched it and unfolded it. It was another name, mine. He smiled faintly and said, "She told me you'd see it next." I didn't even know what to say. My body felt detached, like I was floating. I carried him back inside, locked every door, every window, turned off every light. But that night, when I looked at the window, there was a reflection. Not mine, not his, hers. The next few days blurred together. I barely ate. I barely slept. My sister eventually insisted I get help, said she'd take care of Adam while I got rest. I agreed, but I didn't go to a hospital. I went home. The house smelled different, like damp wood and burnt plastic. The air was stale, thick. I walked into Adam's room and saw that the small box I'd found earlier was gone. The lamp was on, flickering. I checked the closet, the floor, every drawer, and then I noticed the nightstand drawer was slightly open. Inside was the missing camera, the one that had vanished. I hesitated, then plugged it into my laptop. There were only 2 videos left. The first one was from the night before I installed the new camera, the one where she'd looked straight at the lens. But the second file, that one was new, recorded the night before I came back. I pressed play. The room was empty at first. Then Adam walked in, barefoot, dragging something behind him, a blanket. He sat on the bed, turned toward the camera, and whispered, "Dad, she's waiting." Behind him, the door opened. My wife stepped in, pale, expressionless. She placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she looked at the camera and said, clear as day, "He's next." The feed ended. That was 2 nights ago. Last night, I woke up to my phone ringing. Unknown number. I answered, and for a second, all I heard was static. Then a voice, hers, soft, calm, and close. "Come home," she whispered. "He misses you." And then the call cut off. When I checked my phone this morning, there was a new photo in my gallery. It wasn't from me. It showed Adam's room. The same as always, except now, there were 2 shadows on the wall. One small, one tall, both standing side by side, waiting. I don't even remember leaving my sister's house that morning. One moment I was staring at that photo on my phone, the next I was on the highway, driving back toward the old house like something had taken over the wheel. Every rational thought screamed to turn around, but something deeper, something primal, kept pushing me forward. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sky had turned the color of ash. The house looked wrong. The curtains were drawn even though I'd left them open, and the front door was slightly ajar, swaying in the wind. I killed the engine and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it. The couch, the coffee mug still on the table, the faint smell of her perfume clinging to the air. It almost felt peaceful, if not for the silence, heavy, electric silence that felt like it was listening. I called out her name. Nothing. Called for Adam. Still nothing. I moved room to room, checking every corner. When I reached Adam's room, my breath caught. The wallpaper, blue with little rockets and clouds, had peeled away in strips. On the wall beneath, written in what looked like charcoal, were those same names again, hundreds of them, layered over each other, until the words bled into an unreadable blur. Except for one. The last one, written clean and dark. Mine. My chest tightened. I took a step closer, and the air grew colder. The camera I'd left on the desk was still there, red light blinking, recording. I picked it up, half afraid to see what was on it. The screen showed static for a few seconds, then the feed steadied. Adam sat on the bed again, just like in the last video, but this time he was facing the window. He turned his head slowly toward the lens and smiled, a small, lifeless smile. "You came," he said. My throat went dry, then the door behind him creaked open. She walked in. My wife, pale, hair tangled, eyes distant, except it wasn't her, not the way I remembered her. Her movements were off, stiff, like her body was just a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. She sat next to Adam, wrapped her arm around him, and they both looked directly at the camera. Then she spoke, her voice calm, almost kind. "He doesn't belong to you anymore." I dropped the camera. The sound it made when it hit the floor echoed through the house. I ran upstairs, burst into the room, but it was empty. The bed, the walls, everything, gone quiet again. That's when I heard the whisper. Not from behind me, not from the corner, but from inside my head. "He's ours now." I stumbled back, clutching my ears, but it didn't stop. The voice was soft, almost tender. My wife's tone, but layered, like two voices speaking through one mouth. I ran out of the room, down the stairs and into the kitchen. The front door slammed shut behind me with a force that shook the walls. I grabbed my phone, but it was dead. Screen black. When I looked up, she was standing in the doorway. She looked the same, my wife, but her eyes weren't hers anymore. They were hollow, black, reflecting nothing. "You shouldn't have left us," she said quietly. "Where's Adam?" I demanded. She tilted her head. "He's with me." And then, from the top of the stairs, I heard it, a small voice, faint but clear. "Dad." I looked up. Adam was standing there, clutching the banister. His pajamas were clean, his face calm. "Come upstairs," he said softly. My instincts screamed no, but my body moved anyway. Step by step I climbed. My wife didn't follow. She just stood at the bottom, watching with that empty stare. At the top, Adam turned and walked back into his room. I followed. The air felt thick, pressing against my chest. Inside, the room was darker than before. The curtains had been torn down, and the names on the wall seemed to shift in the dim light, like they were breathing. Adam sat on the bed, legs crossed, hands folded neatly. "Do you see her now?" he asked. "See who?" He smiled, a strange, distant smile, the one Mom talks to. I turned toward the corner, the same one he'd pointed to that first night. It was darker than the rest of the room. As my eyes adjusted, I saw movement, slow, deliberate. Something was there. It wasn't a shadow. Shadows don't move against the light. This thing did. It stretched, reshaped itself until it looked almost human. A woman's shape, long hair, her face blurred like it was shifting between expressions. And then I realized the voice that had been whispering all those nights wasn't my wife's. It was this thing. My knees went weak. "What do you want?" I whispered. It tilted its head. When it spoke, the sound wasn't just in the room, it was inside me. "She gave him to me." I shook my head. No, she wouldn't. She did. The voice almost sounded kind. "You didn't see what she saw. The boy is open. He listens. He belongs." I grabbed Adam by the arm, but his skin felt ice cold. He didn't resist, just looked up at me and said, "It's okay, Dad. She helps me sleep." The figure moved closer. I stepped back, dragging Adam with me, but the door slammed shut before we reached it. The lights flickered, and the air turned thick, suffocating. I could feel it, something ancient, wrong, filling the space. And then she appeared again, my wife standing beside that thing, only this time she wasn't hollow. She looked alive, peaceful even. "You don't have to fight it," she said softly. "It wants to make us whole." I shouted, begged, anything to break whatever spell they were under. The lights burst with a crack, plunging everything into darkness. Adam's voice echoed through the black. "She says you can stay too." And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, it was morning. The room was empty. The house was silent. My wife, my son, gone. All that remained was the camera on the floor, still recording. I picked it up with shaking hands and looked at the feed. There they were, both of them, sitting on the bed, holding hands, smiling at the camera. Behind them, in the corner of the room, the figure leaned close to the lens and whispered one final word before the feed cut out. "Finally."